Hey, let me ask you a question. Do you remember what this means in Chinese? If not, then definitely go back to the previous video for day 8 of the Chinese challenge. Check out what Robert Huggins had to say here about how fast that he learned numbers. And then let's get started with today's day 9 video of Chinese when we're going to see what all this beautiful magnetic imagery can help us learn quickly. And we're introducing a new little bridging figure here, which is Patrick Swayze. Remember him? Dirty Dancing and all that stuff? Was so excited to see him. Now, a little pointer before that we get started about what this series is all about, in case that you've forgotten. I really have some laser targeted missions in mind. The first is that I want to share my mnemonics for Chinese phrases, and I want to share why and how these images work. I want to inspire your imagination and memory, and I want to win you as a lifelong subscriber to this channel. So please click a subscribe before we continue and hit the like button. If you like this, of course, we don't need any inauthentic like this is going on here because that would just be rude. But this is day 9 and we have a lot more coming up and I don't want you to miss any of them. So let's get started and look at what this is all about. If you've been following along, then you know this is the Karate Kid and you know that that is a sign or signature to our minds that this is you in Chinese, or ni. And again, I should point out I'm not a Chinese native speaker, so I'm going to give you a resource that you can find all these phrases in Chinese native speech from multiple speakers and hear it with regional dialects, but please do not take my pronunciation. I'm learning Chinese along with you, and the goal is to get the words and phrases into memory so that you can practice pronunciation from muscle memory, get it into muscle memory, and also do listening practice to get the muscle memory of your ears, so to speak, working. But the goal here is also really to learn about mnemonics, right? And so give you the Chinese native speakers later once you understand how to use all these tricks in order to get stuff into memory. And we got another interesting bridging figure who's going to show up here, and we'll talk about him in a second, but you probably recognize Shiva here, right? Well, what's going on here in greater depth is we have, and we'll throw the pinyin on because that's helpful. We have ni sui shi huan zhonghua naga cheng shi, right? And again, my pronunciation is something that I'm working on. But you know, I speak with my wife and she helps me, and you need a native speaker as well. And check out Skill Silo. I've used that for Chinese. I got a post on the Magnetic Memory Method website and the podcast all about Skill Silo. iTalki or iTalki is also a decent resource, so check them out. But the point here is that I really wanted to just nail this sway sound, and there's different ways that sway sound comes up in Chinese, but I wanted a figure for it, so Patrick Swayze came to mind. And you know, I was interviewing Lynn Kelly about her book The Memory Code, and we were talking about how that for a lot of people when they start with mnemonics, they're really slow to come up with these images, and she remarked upon how fast I was because I came up with an image for a word that she shared really quickly. And really that quickness, that speed just comes from doing this stuff, right? And so I share these mnemonics with you in the hopes that you'll come up with your own images, and you can certainly use the images of others, but the point is to come up with your own so that you can come up with images fast. And you might not always want to use Patrick Swayze for a sway sound, right? And you might want to think about things differently. And then, of course, well, this is sway with the fourth tone. Well, what about with the third tone or the second tone or the first tone? Do you want to have Patrick Swayze for all of those, or do you want something else? Now, for me, I want him because I'm going to use the Magnetic Memory Method tone control system, which is very fascinating and it's very helpful. So that figure can be the same for all the tones. But for you, it might be different because this is about method, not some fantasy that someone's going to hand you a system, teaching you how to think about mnemonics so that you can master the art and the craft of memory and use it on your own without, it's teaching you how to fish instead of doing the fishing for you, which is really, really important. So same thing with here, Shi Huan, because Obi Wan Kenobi, of course, is not exactly like Huan It isn't really that close at all when you think about it. But for me, it's a very strong trigger that I was able to see this once and remember when he's with Shira, Shihuan, which is, to like, or do you like. So like ni shi huan would be do you like, or do you like, basically. And so you can think deeper about it, and when you actually have the characters on there, this is kind of like a nice way to get into character study as well, because you can start to think about, okay, so when I look at this, what can I see here that might help me remember those sounds? And that's a whole different course for a future time. Make sure, again, you're subscribed to this channel for news about that, and be subscribed at magneticmemorymethod.com, of course, because that's where everything comes out first. But this is really, really an interesting thing to start thinking about. But for now, let's stick with the pinyin and look at the next one. Now, for me, Chonghua is something as a signature that I like to have if I need it in a phrase, which, I got to a point where I don't really need to see that particular thing in a string of sentences, but if I'm trying to remember the phrase, the exact order from the source, then it's really useful. And what I have here is not just this randomly, but it's actually a t-shirt on Keanu Reeves, whom I saw one time in Manhattan, and he's got, instead of I love New York, he's got I love Chonghua, and it's very, very helpful. But I don't have a picture of him wearing that shirt because it never really happened. It's just in my imagination, right? But you can think here about the principle. The principle is that this is really abstract in space, right? What you want is somehow something that reminds you of the sound and meaning of Chonghua, and that brings it back to you. So it might not be Keanu Reeves with an I Love China t-shirt or I Love Chonghua t-shirt. It might be something else. And notice here that there's actually characters inside of this, which is beautiful for love. Really, really nice that they did that. In any case, now we're going to move on, and we're going to think about what's going on here, right? So that's quite an interesting thing here, because this we need this naga, and that is actually, there's a word for one of the throws in Judo, which is naga, and so now it's much more concrete in the mind. And you can come up with lots of different things, but that's what came to me, and fortunately there's a really good way to represent these throws. And you're gonna find that this general sound comes up quite a bit in Chinese, so it's good to have a image for it. Even better is for that image to be super hyper specific. So I used to do Judo with my brother, and he actually took Judo courses, so better said, he did Judo on me. But so I can make that very, very specific. And because I know German, I can use like this na sound in there as well. And I actually can't get too deep into what those images are, because they're just pretty brutal. But anyway, then what I wanted here was Deborah Unger with chopsticks, and she's, in my mind, tussling Shiva's hair here, right? So that just, the fact that she has chopsticks helps me with this kind of like sound. And it's more than just the sound, it's also the meaning, right? You want to always construct these things in a way that helps you with the meaning. So she's got these chopsticks that are very important to me because they were given to me when I first went to China as a hello gift from the woman who's now my wife. So that's really exciting. And so that's helping me remember the meaning of this, which is what is, literally, you most like China, which city, which is, what's your favorite city in China? And so that just all helps. And again, this is all like deeply personal, and the more personal you make it to yourself, the better you're going to be able to recall these images and get back both the sound and the meaning, because that's always your goal with imagery like this, is to get back the sound and the meaning. And of course, what's really, really important is that you've actually heard the sound correctly. And so one of my big problems in mnemonics, and it happens more frequently than I'd like, is that I just don't hear things properly. I'm 80% deaf in my left ear. I don't know, that's a not so known fact about me. But so when I make missed calls, like memorizing names of people or spontaneous phrases and so forth, often it has to do with that deafness. And so it can sometimes be a little bit tricky, but you know what? It's just a story to tell about being a lifelong learner and the tools that one uses. And the tools are so good that if you get it wrong because you heard it wrong, it's often not because of the memory techniques, it's because of the actual hearing. And that's why I like this program so much from Mandarin HQ, which is a beautiful, wonderful, exciting way to hear multiple native English Chinese speakers speak phrases like the ones that we just went over. And you can get beginner level, you can get elementary, you can get intermediate, and you can see that I've gone a certain distance into intermediate, but I decided to go back to beginner and complete everything. And so this is called the Real Spoken Chinese Vault. It's so incredible. You get exactly what it sounds like on the box. You get exposure to Chinese native speakers asking really, really pertinent questions that you're actually going to use. And then you get answers from 6 Chinese speakers for each question. It's so powerful. And, you know, it's way better than textbook because it's real. So you get different ways to express the same thing. So you're going to pick up a lot of vocabulary. You're going to almost on autopilot come to understand grammatical principles, and you're going to hear the way people actually speak. You know, a friend of mine, Ollie Richards, he's been talking a lot lately about how important listening is, not perfectly formed and complete sentences, but listening to people speak with fillers and hesitations and incomplete sentences. And you know, unnatural slowness of corporate-made language learning programs just doesn't fly anymore because there's a speed to language and there's connected speech, which means that, you know, when you hear these native speakers, they're going to blur the words together in the same way that I'm blurring words together in English right now. But what's so great is you can just click question 1 15 times if you need to get into the granular detail of how this one person is speaking it. And you can't see it here, but below there's a little discussion area, and you can make guesses. Oh, is that person from Beijing, or are they from the South? And you'll get an answer. It's a really great thing. And you also just get real people, and they're answering questions that you might really want to ask, which when you have voice actors reading scripts out loud, those scripts are usually not questions that you'd really want to ask, like, what's your favorite city in China? I can't think of any language learning textbook, and I've gone through many in my day that even has that question, right? So it's really great questions that you get, and those questions have cool vocabulary that you're actually going to want to use. And you come to understand grammatical principles on autopilot, so to speak, but you also have a forum for asking questions. And speaking about forums, you get an extra bonus when you use this special link I've been showing on the screen here, magneticmerrymethod.com/YT Chinese. I've made a special group. It's the Magnetic Merry Method Chinese Vault bonus. It's secret. You only get invited if you've used that link. And I'm really pushing this to encourage you to try this amazing resource. It's so fantastic. And to really help you out further, I'm going to give you the password to a video on my site that is how to use the Real Spoken Chinese Vault with the Magnetic Memory Method. It's about a 20-minute training, and you're going to love it. It's really going to help you out understand how to place these images in a memory palace so that you can practice a kind of recall that will get them into long-term memory very quickly. You also get Chinese tone control, which I mentioned. It's a really, really fundamental skill. And you know what? I'm going to be straight up with you. You might not get this overnight because it really requires you to add another memory approach to your practice. It's called the major method, and that is really, really powerful to have anyway. So this is a real good investment, learning that and seeing how it bolts onto Chinese. So that link again is magneticmerrymethod.com/YT Chinese. And you know, if that's not enough, beneath tone control, there's something called the Ultimate Language Learning Secret, which has a big, beautiful graphic like this. This is a full video training that is designed And you know, some people have criticized it as having some cheerleader elements. Well, language learning does have some tough stuff, and having some cheerleading once in a while does help, but it's more than cheerleading. Don't be blinded by that. It's actual practical tips about how to get yourself to actually go through the activities that are required to learn a language. Because you can have all the memory tricks in the world, you still need to get yourself to speak with strangers, right? You still need to show up every day to the practice of language learning, and that requires discipline, it requires focus, it requires some insider tips from people who've been there before, or who are at least on the path with you and making progress. And so that's what this program is all about. It's very, very helpful, and a lot of people have enjoyed it. And yeah, there's some cheerleading in it. I've been called the Bruce Lee of memory thanks to this course, and that's because of some of the philosophy that I bring to the game. But I think you always need to match practical tips with philosophy. You need to know how to think about what you're doing so that you make better choices while you're doing it. Now, back to practical tips. I also got a bonus here that's normally locked up inside the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. It's about memorizing Chinese poetry using something called the pillar technique. And then when all is said and done, I'm going to give you, and this is a long-term project for me, but I'm going to write all of this stuff up when I reach a certain level with Chinese. The people who have this program are going to get the PDF version of this book when I've written it all out. So if you are interested in being able to access dozens and dozens of questions that you're actually going to use as you learn Chinese, and have access to a variety of answers spoken by native speakers, and you can just click them as many times as you want to dig real deep and granular into the pronunciation, then I want to invite you to join this special training. It's called the Real Spoken Chinese Vault. You can get it at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT Chinese. And of course, I got all these bonuses for you. And so let's make a deal. Head over to magneticmemorymethod.com/YT Chinese, and that link will set you up with all these bonuses. And I really look forward to learning more about you and your journey with Chinese and sharing that together in a way that we couldn't do otherwise. So thanks for watching this video, and until we speak again, keep yourself magnetic.